to. This is a bit of an experiment. As you can tell, you'll be able to tell that immediately. I'm filming this on, one of you was very kind enough to send me a relatively new Kindle Fire Max 11-inch tablet. One of the newest pieces of tech that I have. I find myself using it quite a bit. It's really zippy and responsive. The person who was kind enough to send it also sent it in a very useful case, a kind of canvas case with many different stand options and a detachable keyboard and whatnot. I've been using it quite a bit, and naturally, when I start to use any piece of technology quite a bit, I start to wonder how much I can use it. Can I use it for literally everything that I do? This Kindle does not have the iPad iOS. It does not have an Apple iOS, but it is still workable. I sideloaded the Google Play Store onto it and was able to load Google Chrome, which gives me access to all of my documents, gives me access to all of my email. It makes it possible for me to communicate with the outside world and send documents, mark them up, edit them. I can, of course, watch videos on this. I can, of course, read on it. It is a Kindle. And that leaves only making videos to talk to my imaginary booktube friends. Now, I asked this thing earlier. I've been experimenting with this a little bit all day because I may or may not be expecting, rather eagerly, another piece of tech. I've been experimenting with this all day, on and off, in between doing other things, and I asked it earlier about live streaming. And it does appear to be able to live stream, but it does not appear to be able to schedule a live stream. I know that it can. It must be able to do that. I'm only accessing YouTube, after all. And YouTube does give me the controls to schedule a live stream. So I haven't figured that out yet, but I've been falling off the wagon when it comes to Steve streams. So that's not an paramount importance anyway. Really, filming a video, having it look and sound all right, and then having it upload without any problems to YouTube, that's a big thing. So I thought I would do just a bookish conversation. Not really Michael K. Vaughan does his weekend reading report. People do reading wrap-ups and reading roundups. I like to do Friday reads. I didn't do that this week, but I like to do that. When I do my Friday reads, I always make a mention of the fact that it's an extremely fractional representation of what the whole landscape is for me in the reading world for the whole week in question. I do a lot of reading in a given week, a lot more than most people, because I don't do anything else. Like, for instance, this week, as most weeks in 2024, I have been hugely overdosing on indie books, on well-designed and maybe sometimes competently written indie books that are suggested to me by Free Booksy or Book Dragon or Book Gorilla or whatever, all those aggregator sites that just they put in your email the email books deals of the day. I signed up for a bunch of those. I've got a lot of good reading out of those. Not always, Tolstoy, but very energetic, lots and lots of enthusiasm behind them. I've done a lot of reading like that this week and every week. This last week, the week that is technically ending today, also features a lot of reading that I've been doing from the giant dragon hoard of books that I got last week when David Murphy was my guest, and we had a car, so we could go everywhere for used books. I've been digging a lot into those books rather than just chucking them onto a pile. But I wanted to show you some things here. I want to make a video of relative representative length, because another thing I don't know about this machine is, will it stop recording? Will it balk at recording? I don't think that it will. I'm not using an app. I'm using the device's native camera. Why would that care how long I go? And maybe I'm just flashing back to one MacBook that I used to have. Just would not play well with Photo Booth, which was the onboard app that I used to film videos. It just wouldn't do it. It would film for a few minutes and then stop. Sometimes it'd go for 30 minutes without stopping, but sometimes it'd go for 5 and then stop, which obviously makes it totally unreliable, and I couldn't figure out any way around that. Fortunately, I don't have to deal with that MacBook anymore. So that's one question here. Will this take a 20-minute video? But I thought the most natural way to do a test, rather than just waste it, would be to talk to you a little about books. Some of the books. It's not a reading roundup, not even close. But I thought I should bring up some bookish issues that I've been having. This is not really stuff that I've been chopping away, just pounding off all the new stuff that I can, and plenty of old stuff. But these are things that have issues attached to them. I've got issues. Mainly things that are snagging me for one reason or another. Like, for instance, this thing, which we've seen on this channel. Some of you have expressed interest in it. Tudor networks of power, in which these two authors use data network science. Look at this thing. Look at how terrifying this is. They use data network science on the British Royal Archives. The 1,000 and change letters that exist in the National Archives that have now all been digitized. Every detail of them has now been digitized, I think since 2008, which allows you not only to search, obviously that would be the first thing that would occur to a normal person, not a data science specialist, would be that now you can search. For all kinds of things, you can search. But as these two authors point out, that also allows you to do data set analysis. Extremely complicated data set analysis, and they do. In this book, they do. This is unlike any Tudor book I have ever read, and I've read more of them than anybody alive. This is unlike any of them, because it's not really concerned with more than data. Who was sending letters to whom, and how often, and why, and how many responses were they getting? How many people crop up in an analysis like that that would not crop up in a historian combing their way through the archives? You would not think a minor countess in Ferrara would crop up. If you were looking through those archives, as plenty of scholars have when they weren't digitized, names like hers would not crop up. But you do the data analysis, it turns out she was getting letters from everybody and sending them to everybody. We have a number of, this is mainly meant to be the Tudor era, so the accession of Henry VII and then all the way to, the death of Queen Elizabeth. In that time period, you have a whole bunch of people writing letters to and fro, but you also have a number of massive document accumulators, massive garden mole accumulators. You've got Cardinal Wolsey, you've got Thomas Cromwell, and you've also got Walsingham, Elizabeth's intelligence operative, spy agent, indispensable man, also William Cecil and his son. These people amassed letters like nobody's business, just like nobody's business. It was Henry VII, doesn't get much of the credit that he deserves in the Tudor annals, but it was Henry VII that really incorporated the idea of what we would consider a bureaucracy. And that means you put everything on paper. You don't want some shire sheriff claiming, I didn't know, or, who's to say that I was being a rapacious, horrible vulture to the people under my control? Who's to say? Well, if there's a record, then the records can say. And records can also be incriminating, especially when, in the reign of Henry VIII, state trials start to take off. And you need to have lawyers bustling into the room with sheafs full of documents. Well, those documents have to come from somewhere. And those people, those three in particular, amassed vast amounts of these things. And now they're all digitized. And these authors go through them and figure out who was talking to who and why and about what and how often. And I have been living with this book. It is not gripping reading. I'm sorry, no offense to the authors, but it is not gripping reading. But to me, it's hands down the most fascinating book I've read so far this year. And it's going to take a lot of work to supplant it, even though it's not gripping reading, because this is a different way for me to look at the Tudor era. The problem here is that there are two kinds of reviews that I can write about this. One would simply tell you all of what I've just told you and give you some details and whatnot, maybe a few Borscht Belt one-liners, and the other would have to grapple with what this is and what it portends for the future. And I don't know which of those to do, so my review is very late. I want to write a review of this thing, but I'm still grappling with it, so I thought I would put it in this test video. There's another thing that I'm grappling with, mainly for just enjoyment reasons. I can't wait to get the finished copy of this thing. We've already seen it. This is Richard King's Sailing Alone, a case-by-case narrative history of the weird yen that strikes some people to go out on their own and sail around the world, or around just individual oceans. I read this at a shot. As soon as I got it, it pretty much bolted everything else to one side, because I have spent an enormous amount of time on Earth's waters, including an enormous amount of time sailing, where I won't say alone, because I was never alone, but I was the only human on board. I had a bunch of beagles, but I was sailing alone. I know all about what that means. And there were many, many times when I was doing that where I honestly did just repeatedly wonder, how does anybody do this if they have to sleep 8 hours a day? How do they do that? How do you not? Humans start to lose health, lots of it, including stuff you wouldn't associate with the brain, like the cardiac system, if they undersleep. It's serious harm you can do to your body. I don't require as much sleep as you do. And so I often think about that. I thought about that when I would be manning the tiller in the middle of nowhere, thinking, well, I think this was before GPS or anything like that. I think I know that I'm off the shipping lanes. So I probably don't have to worry about some 1,000-ton monster cutting my craft in half without even knowing it. But what about everything else? How does anybody do this when they're all by themselves? They can't have a mate spell them. Uh, I thought about that a bit when I smashed through this the first time, but then I started just thinking about what it does to you and what it's like and all the different perspectives that this book is giving. What a book. What an amazing book. Uh, I have done a lot of solo sailing, including some routes that I look at YouTube videos now. I see, attractive young couples doing those same routes, for instance, sailing solo across the Indian Ocean. And they've got all the equipment in the world. They've got a diesel backup on their wind-driven vessel, so they're never at the mercy of the waves. They've got all sorts of GPS and satellite emergency networks and whatnot. They know where the shipping lanes are. They know where all the vessels are. They know when weather's coming days before it gets to them. They know they're never far from help. It's an alien world. So I lost myself in this book, and I keep going back to it when I shouldn't, when I have other things to occupy my attention. Same thing with this. This has been on my mind. I've been picking and pecking around the peripheries, telling myself over and over again that I do not need to reread this book. There's way too much to read, new stuff. Well, the book world is coming up on its spring season. That will be saturated with new books. But I keep going back to this, the David Green translation of Herodotus. The first time that I read this, it struck me as my least favorite of any English language translation that I'd ever read of one of my favorite authors. But I've been going at this again, finding a lot more that's worthwhile in it, and just forcing myself not to just reread the whole thing pencil in hand and to hell with the rest of what I have to read. I can't say to hell with the rest of what I have to read. I can't do that. There's way too much. I'm falling behind even with Tudor Networks of Power. But along those same lines, there's been another thing that's been distracting me quite a bit, and that is not specifically this book, although I went back to this book right away. Baruch Spinoza, Benedict Spinoza, has been distracting me quite a bit. There's a monster biography, a gigantic biography of him out there by a great author that I did not get last year. I'm putting out feelers, really hoping to get a copy of it, even belatedly, in 2024. There's also a new biography of Spinoza in the Jewish Lives series coming out that'll be very small. But that sent me back to this, which is Spinosa's Ethics, translated by George Eliot, the George Eliot, who did this well before that, I think, before mid-19th century. And then, I won't say got distracted, but she did get derailed by her fiction publishing career. Otherwise, if she had published this as soon as she finished it and brooded it out to the world, it was the first translation, certainly by a woman, of the whole of Spinoza's Ethics. And Claire Carlyle, I'm not always completely happy with her writing, especially about George Eliot, but I love her edition of this book. This is a lovely thing from a few years ago from Princeton University Press, even to the point of, this has been attracting me even to the point of engaging with Spinoza in the actual ethics, which is philosophy. And as much as I love Spinoza, he's one of the rare philosophers I think I would have liked to have sit here for wine and calzones, although he would have had a million objections. Even so, this is a work of philosophy. It's a torturing of the subject of ethics and what they mean and where they come from and what their woof and weave is. And as usual on the subject, I say what I always say, which is that a 10-year-old knows the answer to all of these questions. These are not complicated. This is just what philosophers do. They take something self-evident and torture it into a language system all its own, and then write a big turgid book about it. Now, Spinoza's Ethics is not turgid. It is completely self-evident, but it's not turgid. I think that men like to do these sorts of things because if they can complicate questions of ethics or morality, then they can console themselves that those questions are complicated. And if the questions are complicated, you can forestall action, which is, I think, the main thing that every living philosopher has ever wanted to do, is to forestall action. Actually, ethical questions and moral questions are not complicated. They're usually very simple, which means that simply knowing about them isn't enough. You then have to act on them. I don't think philosophers like to do that. I think this is just Spinosa hemming and hawing. But Eliot's translation is wonderful. This edition is wonderful. And I've got Spinosa on the brain because I'm hoping that 2024 gives me two biographies, one at 120 pages and one at 1,200 pages. I'm hoping that that's the case. But then there's another thing. I don't know what this video is. I don't even know what I'll call it. I don't know that it will upload. It's a test. That's all. I don't know what I'm talking about here, except just books that are bothering me, bookish things that are on my mind. Ordinarily, I give you nice demarcated lists. Here are 10 books that I'm going to read. Here are 10 books that I have read just recently. Here are 10 books that I recommend. This is just more, I don't know, Steve's weird reader problems or whatever it is. And this next one is a perfect example of that. This is Ben Mazur's truly impressive new edition of the Poetry of Delmore Schwartz. I don't like the poetry of Delmore Schwartz, and I don't like what I know of Delmore Schwartz as a person. I don't like either one of those things. But this is just fascinating. This big new edition, this comes out in April. This comes out in April. Big. I think we saw the finished copy on this channel. It's just sweepingly painstaking. It just amazing. It is clearly meant to be the definitive collection of Schwartz's poetry. I don't think there's anything else that could even come close. It is, in other words, to use a hackneyed phrase, a monument of scholarship. And I know that much about it. And again, I am faced with the choice of writing two kinds of book reviews. There are two kinds of things I can do, and only one is possible unless I write this review next year. Some of you will remember on this channel that when I grapple with the collected works of a poet, I recently did it with W.H. Auden. I am now currently doing it with Philip Larkin. I take my sweet time. I don't usually take my sweet time with anything, any kind of reading, because in about 5 minutes, you're going to be dead. And there's so much coming down the chute that I usually don't do that. But with poetry, I've found that you kind of need to. You kind of need to let it unfold inside you. You kind of need to well, I know this is going to sound weird and artsy-fartsy, but in addition to spending time thinking about it, you need to give it time to think about you. And you can't blast through that. I can't do that. Lord knows, I read Auden the one way for years, decades, and did not get it at all. Then I read him the other way, slowly, painstakingly, absorbingly, and it was a totally different experience. I now love him. And I have a feeling the same thing is going to happen with Larkin. Maybe even more so. And that's the choice that this book presents me. This comes out in a couple of weeks. So that is too soon for me to live with Schwartz's poetry. It's too soon. There isn't enough time for me to do that. And get a review of this volume, a discussion of the poetry done in a timely manner when this book is new, when it's in bookstores and libraries, and people might want to see that review. There isn't enough time for me to do that, which leaves me only with writing a review, also serviceable, also completely valid, of what this edition is, compared to all other editions, what it does, how it does those things, and just leave the poetry alone. That feels incomplete to me. That's a little bit of me being too hard on myself, because that is a serviceable review. That will definitely serve my readers, who maybe don't want me to go on it. 500 extra words about what Delmore Schwartz's poetry does to me. Maybe they don't care about that. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't care either. That's the question that this thing, it's not really a question. That's the problem that it's giving me, is that I can't write the two kinds of reviews that are available. There's one that Publishers Weekly will do, has already done. 320 words. one-line bullet opening, one-line bullet ending, and then the main body of the review, which covers what the edition does. Okay, fine. A library acquisition department in Tuscaloosa is going to want to know that. And that's all they're going to want to know. Whereas you've also got the London Review of Books, which will certainly review this, but maybe it will be next year. Maybe they'll get somebody really good. My vote would be August Kleinzahler to do 4,000 words on this edition of Delmore Schwartz, in which this edition of Delmore Schwartz is mentioned once at the first paragraph or at the last paragraph, and all the rest of it is a great poet writing about a poet. Movingly, instructively about a poet. Well, I'm not saying that I would be moving or instructive, but I don't get to even try to do that if I want a review around the time when this thing publishes. So I've got all these bookish problems. All these bookish problems that I'm dealing with. And I thought this is valid material for BookTube. Plenty of you make videos about this sort of thing. Why can't I? Just because I'm a leper, a pariah, an outcast on BookTube? These are things that are bookish problems at the moment. The Green Herodotus is calling to me, and it absolutely can't. Even if I were to eliminate new releases and just think about the older books that I have bought recently that I haven't read as many times as I've read Herodotus, no, it absolutely can't. And Spinosa's Ethics, it's a good volume, a very good volume, and I love George Eliot, but is it really that it's calling to me, or is it just that I want that great big biography and I don't have it? Or maybe I'll settle for that tiny biography and I don't have that either. I don't know. I don't know. And then there's Sailing Alone. And I have to wonder when I'm constantly finding myself drawn back to Sailing Alone, I have to wonder if it's not the book at all. The book is pretty good, but I have to wonder if I would have been drawn to it endlessly anyway, just because it's such a bath of memories from long before most of you were born. Those beagles are long gone. Goodness gracious. And if you'd found me then, brown as a nut, thin as a rail, to quote Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, if you'd have found me then and said, hey, I'm from the future, and you make a broadcast several times a day talking about books, and you're old, and you have one dog, I'd have said, oh, that's kind of weird. All that technology sounds weird, but tell me about my beagle. And you'd have had to say, it's not a beagle. It's not a beagle. It hasn't been a beagle in 20 years. Every time I dip back into this book, I remember all of those adventures in storms that came up out of nowhere, in storms that, if anything, are arguably worse, the storms you can see coming a long way away and you can't do anything about it. Can't outrun them, can't hide from them. There's nothing but you and water anywhere. So you just have to herd all the beagles down below because you don't want anybody getting swept off the deck, and then just do your best. Just do your best. And so on and so forth. Do you have food? Do you have water? Do you know, are your maps any good? Do you know where your next landfall is? To say nothing of human perils. There's a vessel that's, okay, you've been out on the water now for 3 days, and the last 2 days, that vessel has been shadowing you at a steady kept distance in the rear. So you have a sail aft, and you don't know who it is. And they're not getting any closer to you, and they're very intentionally not getting any closer to you. Who are they? They obviously know you're there. So what is that? I wasn't traveling with a cannon or anything. All those memories just come flooding back with this book, which is giving it an unfair advantage that it really shouldn't have. I've got other things to read. And then there's this. A tutor book that is not wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I can't remember the last time that happened. A tutor book where I am thinking about so much of the era. Also, including the ultimate question about a data network analysis of Tudor correspondence in the state archives, which is, does it matter? It's impressive, sure, and endlessly interesting, but does it matter? Who's writing letters to who and whatnot? Don't we want the human element? Isn't that what makes it matter? I don't know. It's all fascinating to me, but these are all problem children. All these books that I'm showing you are problem children. I should be just going on to new releases in April. That should be my main concern. But anyway, anyway, so that is a little bit of a little bit long. It's a long video. A little bit of a just bookish ramble, and it's a test video. Have I been looking in the right place? Is the audio okay? It seems to me, to my eye, that this is by far the sharpest video of any device that I have. Is the audio okay? And also, is it going to upload? Is it going to work? We shall see. I will now try that. I will wrap this up and try the whole back end of it. Will it upload to my channel? Can I set it so that it uploads to private first so that I can add stuff to it and look at it, put a title on it? I don't know. We'll find out together. So I'm going to stop this recording and try to upload this test video, and we'll see what happens. It'd be nice if I had another way. If this were a viable other way to record videos, that would be very nice. But anyway, I'll wrap this up, and hopefully you will see it. Thank you, BookTube.